Hey folks, Sean Jordan from RPG here, and welcome to the OPO Insights podcast. So, with it being April and Donate Life Month, a lot of our friends in the OPO world are pretty busy, and lining up new interviews has been a little bit challenging due to everyone's schedules. But you know what? We're committed to keeping the OPO Insights podcast going every week this year. So, I thought it'd be fun to dive back into some interviews that we did last year and talk a little bit about the hospital experience from the point of view of some of the guests we had on our quarterly best practices webinars. Now, if you didn't get a chance to check these out, and by the way, you can see them all at researchplan.com/BPS videos. We had some fantastic guests on last year, and one of those folks was Dr. Andrew Loudon, who'd been serving then as the director of trauma ICU at University Hospitals at Cleveland Medical Center, but who's since moved down to Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. And what I liked about this interview, which, by the way, was conducted by my friend and colleague, Jenny Oliver, who'd worked with Dr. Loudon when she was at LifeBank, is that this interview articulates some of the very real emotions and frustrations that physicians feel when they're working with an OPO. So here's a snippet of what Dr. Loudon had to say.
I live in a world that when I am told to go to the trauma bay, I have a 10-minute response time. And I think the trauma surgeons kind of live in this, everything has to happen right now mentality. And with aggressive or full management of severe TBIs, you may have a patient who is deteriorating rapidly. So the resuscitation, the emergent craniotomy, everything is on a timeline. When we early engage our OPO partners, there is an expectation on the surgeon side that happens at the same speed as everything else. So I think what we often saw were situations where it's 2 a.m, it's a devastating transcranial gunshot wound, GCS of 3, meets all the triggers for early OPO involvement, but we don't see the OPO until the morning. And from the time of that injury through the morning, the patient is becoming increasingly unstable. The family may have arrived, they're grieving, they don't fully understand what's happened. And we start engaging the family in goals of care discussions. And if you slow that timeline down, the OPO needs to be involved in that discussion. So often what you have is you have a timeline where we've taken the family from their loved one was walking around to now their loved one is irreversibly damaged and is dying and is becoming unstable and is no longer a full code, and all that happens before 6 a.m. So I think the pressure point of, or should OPOs run as a 24-hour organization or engage in families in that same window, I think you may have a better relationship with the family if you're able to engage in that conversation early. And I know that we've had instances where we don't get that patient stabilized and they either herniate and die or they are withdrawn on prior to the engagement with OPOs. So I think that is an area that is something that could be improved on in terms of the relationship. I don't know if it's a realistic expectation for OPOs to be a 24-hour organization, meaning can you pick up the phone and get to the hospital in 30 minutes, not 2 hours? The trauma world is a 24-hour shop, if you will. So we have to be in-house. We have to respond to these emergencies, but it takes a lot of resources to make that happen. And then your second question was about the involvement of families and how you navigate the timing. So let's slow that same timeline down. Not every organ donation case progresses that rapidly. I think the best involvement or the best timing for the OPO to engage families early. What I typically see is, I joke that the goals of care is a trilogy. The first goals of care is nothing more than meeting who the decision makers are, figure out broad goals, figure out, functional status at baseline. You're not looking for tough decisions to be made in that goal or in that meeting. All that you're learning is about the patient, about the family, and the dynamics that you're encountering. I think that a perfect time for the OPO to engage that family is after that initial meeting, because you may or may not be in the end of life plan for that patient. So early engagement doesn't mean that you'll be involved, but it means that you need to have that conversation to also learn a little bit about the patient and the family.
Now, of course, every OPO does things a little differently, but this circumstance he's referring to is something that happens regularly when the clinical team has to engage with the potential donor and their family long before the OPO ever gets involved, because the trauma world really is a 24-hour operation, and that's the way they think. So, what I hope you noticed was that there was this discussion about the relationship that needs to evolve, understanding what's happening with the donor family, learning about the patient, being a part of the ever moving timeline, and then being a partner with the ICU team instead of just showing up and talking about donation right away. Dr. Loudon explained this in a little bit more detail later on in the interview.
Yeah, I'll go back to that the relationship has to exist. So, both sides need to be having the conversation, understanding that this is a professional relationship and that, getting a patient to an organ donation is part of ICU care, whether you want to believe it or not. So there are patients that are damaged beyond repair where goals of care cannot be met, where the best outcome is going to be if the family elects to donation and withdrawal of care. In fact, if the family doesn't want to do donation, the best outcome may be withdrawal of care. There are worse things than passing from your disease. So how does that conversation with LifeBank happen is I think that it needs to be well coordinated. So that initial goals of care meeting the family, delivering bad news, and then end that goals of care meeting, meaning let the family hear that information. Don't expect big changes to be made. And then I think that's a good time for the ICU team to communicate to the OPO about who the decision makers are, what the prognosis of the patient is, and then invite the OPO to meet the family. And that's not to get them consented for donation, but it's to start setting yourself up for the second or the third meeting. Introduce yourself so that you're simply part of the care plan, care team.
One of the things Dr. Loudon also mentions here is the relationship that needs to be formed between the OPO and the family so that the OPO is not just there to make a request, but to be introduced as part of the care team. A smooth relationship with the ICU staff presents the frontline OPO team as being a resource and a component of the way that families and patients are cared for, not just as people who are going to walk in the room and immediately start talking about donation on what is likely the worst day of someone's life. Well, we had another interview in our family services track with the thanatology and grief support expert Lisa Denhofer of Coden Consulting, who often has to talk to people in very sensitive situations involving death for all sorts of contexts. And she's provided help and support for many OPOs. This is a great interview, and you should watch the whole thing. But one of the many things Lisa was very passionate about in this interview is how you show empathy properly in these situations. And a lot of that involves leaving your own problems, concerns, and emotions at the door so you can focus on the people in the room. But you know what? She says it so much better than I can, so let's hear from her.
When I say empathy, I'm talking about professional empathy. So for you to step fully into professional empathy and operationalize it well, you have to do what I call containment and compartmentalization first. Your stuff cannot be in the room. It can't be anywhere near this family, whether you're in a room with them or on the phone with them. Your stuff needs to be put away very safely so that it doesn't get picked at by the circumstances of this case when you are engaging with this family. If that's happening, then your headspace is being taken up with stuff that has to do with you and not them. A lot of people don't understand what's the difference between sympathy and empathy. We all come hardwired with an empathy chip in our brain, literally. And when that's activated, we're able to detect suffering in our environment, and empathy is the gateway to compassionate action. When we are starting to become emotional, or we're having emotional responses, or central nervous system responses, we're not in a place of empathy. We are now in a different place. And it's very possible that your own amygdala is on fire, and now you are more in survival mode rather than being in the frontal cortex. So it's really important to understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. and how to model empathy in your languaging and in your behaviors.
Lisa also talked about the potential for hospitals to be violent and hostile places when families are dealing with an unexpected death, and about how frontline staff can help the hospitals to manage the family's emotions in a way that focuses on the service of speaking to the families. And that helps diffuse the situation by ensuring everyone is feeling heard and supported. So here she is talking about that.
What I found staff was most appreciative of is when I was able to help families calm down. And not that they're happy, but when families begin acting out, when they begin becoming violent, when they start becoming aggressive and threatening, that just sends everybody on their ear. And the first thing they do is call security, and then you've got a real mess on your hands. So I found one of the ways to really be helpful for the staff is to help your work with the family to help them be receptive to the information that is coming at them from the hospital, to be cooperative with staff as that information is coming forward. And that doesn't mean being directive with families, but helping them to get their arms around what has been shoved into their world without their invitation. The more you help hospitals with families, I think the more you help the staff. So it frees them up to do what it is they can do and to work with you. And I had hospital staff in the room with me all the time when I was working with families, particularly when I was at the point of requesting donation, because I wanted them to see what the work is and not what they thought the work is. A lot of hospital people think that, we're strong arming or we're manipulating, and there may be people out there doing that. And I've caught people doing things they weren't supposed to be doing in my coaching and training with organizations. But I wanted them to see how I do it, and that I was somebody who knew what the hell she was doing and was of service to this family in bringing forward this request. And it changed hearts and minds when they could see me in action. And I invite you to do the same. Bring them in, especially if they've been the main nurse attending to this family or the patient. They've got an investment there. Bring them in, make them a part of it.
Lisa's talk was great, but another one of the talks that I still go back and watch came from Amy Weisgerber, who was at CORE during the time of this interview and was always one of my favorite people there because of her smart questions and her wonderful heart for the donor families and hospital partners. Amy decided to provide some evidence-based toolkits for working with people in the hospitals, and I'm going to let her talk you through them all.
It is incredibly important, as with anything, how things start sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. And so having a steady introduction and opening with a family is an essential part of setting the tone as that professional in the room, the person who can be trusted. When I lived and worked in Houston, Texas, down at Life Gift, I did sleep through a hurricane. I did not hear a thing. I woke up the next morning like, oh, wasn't there like a storm or something, babe? He's like, it was like being in a dishwasher, Aim. What are you talking about? Even if you roused me from that slumber, I would probably tell and said, hey, Aim, talk to this family, walk into this room and start the conversation. I would tell them the same thing that I say to every family. My name is Amy. I work with the doctors and nurses who have been taking care of your loved one. And I support families who've had the kind of conversations that you've had so far. I'm here to walk with you and help you through some of these next steps, but I don't want to lose sight of the person that we're talking about. What would be something important for me to know about your loved one? That contextualizes and feels more authentic to me than tell me about your mom, because it's like, well, why? Who are you, right? I'm here. I work with these people. This is what I'm going to be doing that aid it in a sense. And I don't want to lose sight of who we're talking about. What would be important for me to know about them? I know that if the person sitting across the table from me goes, what uses the I can automatically know that this person has a strong, close emotional bond with that person, and that they're going to need additional support because they are just already coming apart at the seams, versus the person who says, like, do you want to know what they did for a living? that's a family that's in a different place, and they're processing information differently. And I can cut some of that softer emotional support to meet their need of like, what is it that you want to know, versus the person who bursts into tears and tells me that their mom was just the best. And there's so many things that they could tell me. How could they possibly pick just one? I already know where I'm going in that conversation so that I can use tools like this Spikes model, the ask, tell, ask model, the I like, I wish, I wonder. And then another model that's similar to Spikes in a way, and I bookended this for a reason, which is that nurse model. So these are both Spikes and nurse, both acronyms for guiding a conversation. So looking at the Spikes model, this is choosing a setting, having conversations in the right place at the right time. These are foundational aspects of the work that we do in family approach. This model is best used by treating teams. This is not something that tends to be something that OPO people use a lot. In fact, the Spikes model was created in the setting of delivering poor prognoses to patients who are receiving the diagnosis of cancer. And so you can see that the setting and the perception and the knowledge of like disease and care options in plain language, that may be true in the setting of a DCD donor, where these are the limitations and this is how it will affect their ADL, and how and what does that mean for quality of life for your loved one. But truly, in an effective setting, this is something that happens prior to the OPO's arrival, and it is best utilized and most effective when we're delivering bad news in clinical settings. These are things that maybe best case scenario, your ICU practitioner has a very high EQ and is using this tool already. They're pulling family into a little conference room and say, I'm Dr. So-and-so, I'm taking care of your loved one. It sounds to me like you might know that they were involved in a bad motor vehicle accident. Can you tell me what somebody has told you so far? What is happening so far? I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I've seen as an ICU doctor, if that'd be okay. And then they can explain that they've had a very bad injury to their brain, or in the accident, they broke a lot of ribs, and that caused some bruising on the lungs, and it's hard for them to breathe. So right now I'm worried about how much oxygen is circulating, seeing and responding to how they receive that information, and then saying, I'm going to go back to the ICU and see if that oxygen level is up any, or continue to treat it a little bit. I'll give you an update soon. We all know that that is the wet dream, best case scenario of physician communication in an ICU setting. Since we're not the ones delivering this is something, though, that you can influence and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, you're going to talk to the family. How did they seem when you asked them about what they knew of the injury? And that might be like, oh God, I didn't ask that question. And then what did or didn't happen prior to you walking into that room. So this is a tool that I know which doctors use and have this capacity, so that when I go in to follow them for a family approach, I know what I'm following, and I know the ones that don't. And so I may preempt them to say, how did the family respond when you used invitation and asked them what they would like to know? How did they respond when you asked them what questions they had? And if it's met with that same stony silence, that's a teaching moment for that physician. And it's also a knowledge point for me for when I go into that space. And so I try to do gentle educations, because if they're not receptive to being educated by a core person, it will surely backfire. I think often of that big fat Greek wedding. The man may be the head, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head whichever way she wants. And for as many years as I've been doing this, I still find it odd to say, your job in these settings is to be the neck. That's welcome to this world. You got to be the neck and turn the head. But one of the other, so that's the Spikes model. What we tend to see, and what is also very effective in an approach setting, is an ask, tell, ask. So what can I'm Amy. I work with families. I support families having the same kind of conversations that you've had. What would be an important thing for me to know about your loved one? That's an ask. They tell me, I can validate that immediately, so that the girl who goes to bits about how amazing her mom is, I can say, how lucky it must be for you to have her as your mom, right? I can also say, it must make what the doctors have told you so far that much more hard to believe. Tell me a little bit about what they've told you so far. Yes, that's right. She had a very large aneurysm. And what that means about where that aneurysm for her is. And then you can kind of fill in the blanks and validate that again with more asks. So this is a very effective model. It's best used in validating their understanding of what communication has been relayed, and then also determining what the next steps are. A classic case where I wish I had known this was when I was early in my career, and the doc said, well, the family's ready for you. And I said, oh, that sounds great. And I walked in and she was flat affect, and she's like, yeah, I said, so what happens now? She was able to parrot back what brain death was. And she said, well, the skilled nursing facility wouldn't take him with the pneumonia. So I guess we'll just have to figure out if they'll take him with the brain death. I didn't know this, and so I had really approached donation, and she said no to donation. And I was like, well, why? She's like, because I'm waiting to see if he'll go to the SNF with the brain death. Using an ask, tell, ask in that early opening and sort of that footing finding really tends to be the best place for this, so that you know where to take that conversation. That ask, tell, ask will also give you the sense of if your family is a down to business, no frills, what do I need to know? So that you don't inadvertently frustrate them. If you are, as I am, a soft and mushy at baseline, I can cut the fluff and get right to the brass tacks. An ask, tell, ask model will get me there so that I don't frustrate my end user. The I like, I wish, I wonder is another very effective modality. This is best used in my experience when there is a difference of opinion or a lot of emotion in a conversation. And sometimes what it looks like is when families are really angry. I have been here all night and I haven't even eaten and da 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 da, and all I've been doing is waiting for a doctor. And nobody can come here, and now all of a sudden you want their organs. Okay, that gives me a chance to step back and I can say, you know what, I really like that you feel comfortable being so honest with me. And I either wish I had known that or I wish our team had done a better job connecting with you. Using silence is another very effective tool in giving pause and giving space. Um, I wonder, knowing how you feel now, if we should take a break and maybe I can see if I can get that doctor to come back and have a different conversation with you so that you can get some of these questions answered. This I like, I wish, I wonder is also very effective in the setting of contested first person, where you have an individual where donation is going to go forward and the family really doesn't want it to. And they tell you you can go kick rocks in bare feet. And you say, you know what, I I really like how honest, and this is usually where I start. Like, I like that you feel comfortable telling me that, and I really wish I had something. I really wish I could give you what you want, which, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that you just want to be done and you don't want them to be an organ donor. And I hear you, and I wish for you that I could give that to you. I wish that this conversation was happening in a different setting, or that you had maybe known this about them prior to this moment in time. I wonder, knowing that donation is going to move forward, what I can do for you in the short term to make this as painless as possible. If you'd like to spend some more time at bedside, let me talk to some of the nurse leaders and see if we can extend your visiting hours. If you'd like for us to be as invisible as possible and not give you updates unless you reach out to me, that's how, I'm happy to meet you wherever you are. I have said to families, I wish I could give you that, and I can't. Outside of that, what does a win look like to you? And it gives you a sense into their headspace, and you might be like, yeah, there's no way I can ever meet that. And then you say again, I wish I could do that for you. I can't. I wonder how you would feel if and then offer a counterpoint. So this can be very effective in de-escalating those contentious situations. This was a model, this nurse model was developed with the palliative care team at the University of Pittsburgh. And this is similar to the Spikes model of wherein you're naming, you're understanding, or even the ask, tell, ask, where you're repeating back a little bit. But this can also, again, be very effective in assessing an emotional state and exploring the family's bandwidth. It is something where I have said to families like, oh, you must be exhausted. And the family's like, no, I'm wired. I can't sleep. I can't relax long enough. And I have so much. And then my dad is gonna get cancer surgery tomorrow. And now my kid is here. And I have a dog with diabetes who's half blind. And you're like, okay, you are exhausted, but you're so wired that you're not like exhausted. Now I have a better sense of where you are. And if the family just shuts down and doesn't engage, it again lets you know that kind of which way you're going in terms of their emotional needs. This can also be very effective with rapid onsets from injury to death. So the mother who was just on the phone with her daughter when her daughter lost track of the vehicle failed to negotiate a turn and rolled over. And the mom was on the phone when the line went dead. I just talked to her. I was just talking to her. This can't be real. This has to feel like a terrible nightmare. Saying those things out loud. Who else would be here? Who else is important for you that's supporting? Who else would be important for you to have here with you? Who do you need to call to tell them? Who loves Jenny the way that you do that would need to know these things and want to be here with you? So this model can be very effective in that setting as well.
Wow. These toolkits Amy shared are so useful. And as she said, they're not one size fits all. Different approaches work well in different situations. And if you check out that full interview, she provided the sources for all of those frameworks as well. And you know what? I'm so grateful because this interview was a fantastic resource. I'd like to close with a couple of practical tips shared by Mary Pat Butcher of Gift of Life Michigan during our final hospital development session last year. She outlined 2 different innovations that Gift of Life has tried out in hospitals to both honor donation champions and to find ways to utilize colored zip ties on adult ventilators to communicate an OPO's involvement while drawing attention in a visible but unobtrusive manner. So here she is talking about that.
Sure. The hospital development team here, we're always creating new initiatives, different things to really bring focus on organ and tissue donation engagement internally and externally. So one thing we launched this year is our Gift of Life Michigan's Challenge Coin, which if any of you are in the military or have friends and family in the military, you'll definitely know what a challenge coin is. But about 7 or 8 years ago, Bruce Nicely, myself, and a few other leaders were invited to Gift of Life Philly, and they had shared this initiative with us, and we just fell in love with it. So basically, we have an online survey, and you can nominate an external partner, a physician or a nurse. And we've had a few of those go through, and it's just amazing. Senior leaders will attend, as well as myself and the HD. And these physicians and nurses are just absolutely blown away by the recognition. We deliver a beautiful certificate along with the coin, and they can display that in their office. So it's just a special way, to honor these champions, our stewards that are there every day advocating for donation. So we do a really good job, and we're really particular about who we're giving it to. And then we also do that internally, which has been great. And I just walked out of a meeting where I had the honor of giving a challenge coin to one of our employees. So it's always a great time, and you want to make sure you're sharing that in front of their peers, and it's just exciting. And recognition is one of the most important things as a leader that you can do for your team. So that's one thing. And I'm happy to talk for a minute or two about another initiative we launched. Now this, my goodness, I think it's probably going on 4 or 5 years, but this has been huge to help slow down those hot referrals. We call them hot at Gift of Life Michigan, hand on tube. So we noticed that when the respiratory therapy folks are in the room, a lot of times we don't have the proper staff there, or maybe they're doing it on off hours, and we have no one in the hospital. So we created this project where it's a green zip tie, and It is attached to the ventilator. And so this picture, you can see the red circle around it. It's pretty, no one really notices it, but what it does is it brings attention to the staff at the hospital that indeed this patient is a potential organ donor. So please slow things down. Please get us on the phone. And we've gone as far as to put this in a note in iTransplant. Has the green zip tie been attached? So it's basically the whole clinical division where this was launched more of an HD initiative, but we have clinical coordinators, we have referral specialists, HDs, all participating in this. And it's really helped to bring awareness to not extubate, to call gift of life first.
And when you shared this with me when we talked yesterday, like I love this idea.
Good,
and
yeah.
I love it because it's visual. And I think there is a lot to say for having a visual cue that it doesn't require a lot of explanation if you know what it is.
Yeah.
But if somebody has to ask, it gives you an opportunity to educate them. And it's so unobtrusive as well.
Yeah.
It's just something that really gets the point across.
Right. And I did want to mention, we do have one hospital that wasn't real keen on attaching something to the vent. And so we also created a very small green magnet and put our logo on it, on the magnet, and they put that on their status board next to the patient's name. So it brings, it's the same thing. Basically, it brings attention that this patient has the potential to save many, many lives. And it's just another great opportunity for our staff to get in front of these physicians. It's always difficult to find new ways, new things to bring into the hospitals. So you can see on this slide down at the bottom, we ordered these really nice little zip pouches. It almost looks like a pencil case, if you will. But the HDs deliver that inside. We have zip ties, we have trigger badges, we put, some cute little giveaways in the bag. But it's another opportunity for these HDs to get in front of the staff and replenish the bags. We're going to mix up the bags this year to bring attention to, so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle in the back of their drawer. But this has been a great initiative. So I'm happy to share whatever if anyone's interested.
Part of having such a fantastic OPO community is the spirit of collaboration and sharing that we're able to enjoy when we have seminars, workshops, exchanges, and conferences. And I, in my role as a researcher, have been so privileged to be a fly on the wall in many of those settings. What I want to encourage you all to do is to not just keep coming up with great ideas to serve your donor families, but to really get out there and share them with your OPO colleagues. You are always welcome to be a guest on OPO Insights if you'd like. You can visit researchplan.com/OPO Insights sign up if you're interested. But I hope you'll also take some time to reach out to your colleagues and ask them questions about how they're solving the problems that you're facing, and that you'll also strive to share your own solutions. When we take the time to listen to one another and hear new ideas, we not only reinforce that we're all working together in different ways to support this wonderful cause of donation, but those of you who are working at OPOs or on the front line or in management can really encourage one another and be assured that you're not the only one dealing with the issues that you see every day. The work is hard and it requires amazing perseverance to do it well, but you know what I found separates the really effective coordinators from the not so effective ones? The willingness to listen, to rethink ideas, to search for solutions instead of being set back by problems. It's about regarding everyone involved in the donation case as a partner and an ally whom you can serve, not as an obstacle to the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. Well, I wish you all the very best. We'll be back next week with more on the OPO Insights podcast. I'm Sean at RPG, and we'll see you next time.